Hello, and welcome to our channel, Stories with Silas. We hope you enjoy watching.
Sheikh Rahman watched the waitress sign away a year of her life with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a bet. Her grandmother's Arabic lessons and his clause 7 were about to destroy that perfect record. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand View Hotel's restaurant cast prismatic light across white tablecloths, creating an atmosphere of effortless luxury that Maya Chen had learned to navigate but never quite belonged to. At 28, she'd mastered the art of becoming invisible among the wealthy, a skill essential for survival in Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishment. Her black uniform, pressed to perfection despite being 3 years old, moved soundlessly between tables as she balanced trays with the precision of a dancer. But Maya Chen was no ordinary waitress. Behind her carefully composed smile and efficient service lurked a mind sharpened by 3 semesters of law school, abandoned when her daughter Emma was born with a congenital heart condition that demanded immediate surgery. The medical bills had mounted faster than her dreams could sustain, forcing her to trade textbooks for serving trays, legal briefs for dinner menus. Tonight, like every night for the past 2 years, Maya carried the weight of $340,000 in medical debt alongside her serving tray. Emma, now 6 years old, needed a second surgery within the next 3 months, a procedure that would cost another $180,000. The number haunted Maya's every waking moment, a figure so astronomical it might as well have been the distance to the moon. The Grandview Hotel restaurant was nestled in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, occupying the ground floor of a 60-story tower that housed some of the world's wealthiest temporary residents. The establishment catered to oil tycoons, tech moguls, and foreign dignitaries who thought nothing of spending thousands on a single meal. Maya had learned to read them all, the nervous nouveau riches who over-tipped to prove their worth, the old money families who barely acknowledged her existence, and the international power brokers who conducted million-dollar deals over Wagyu beef and vintage Bordeaux. Her section tonight consisted of tables 12 through 15, a prime location near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. Table 12 hosted a nervous young couple celebrating an engagement, their happiness so genuine it made Maya's chest ache with memory. Table 13 was occupied by a corporate lawyer she recognized from previous visits, a woman who always ordered the same salmon dish and left exactly 15%. Table 14 remained empty, reserved for a last-minute VIP edition. It was 7:47 p.m. when Maya delivered an amuse-bouche to Table 15, a trio of elderly philanthropists discussing their latest charitable foundation. As she set down the delicate plates, she couldn't help but overhear their conversation about contract law, specifically a dispute over unclear language in a donation agreement. "The problem," explained the silver-haired gentleman in the center, "is that the arbitration clause contradicts the jurisdiction clause. No competent lawyer would have missed it, but here we are." Maya's hand froze mid-reach. The legal terminology sparked something in her brain, a muscle memory from her law school days when she'd excelled at contract analysis. Before she could stop herself, words tumbled from her lips. "Excuse me, sir. I apologize for interrupting, but if the arbitration clause specifies New York courts and the jurisdiction clause designates Delaware, you might have grounds to argue the entire contract is void for mutual mistake. The contradictory terms suggest no meeting of the minds occurred." 3 pairs of eyes turned toward her, expressions ranging from surprise to amusement. The silver-haired gentleman's eyebrows rose with interest. "That's a remarkably astute observation for he caught himself, for someone not involved in the conversation." Maya felt her cheeks flush. "I apologize. That was inappropriate. I shouldn't have—" "No, no!" The woman to his left interrupted, her pearl necklace catching the light. "That's actually brilliant. Are you a lawyer?" "I was, studying to be one before—" Maya gestured vaguely, the unfinished sentence hanging in the air like the expensive perfume that permeated the dining room. What Maya didn't notice was the intense stare from a man who had just been seated at table 14, his dark eyes following her every movement with the calculating precision of a predator sizing up unexpected prey. Sheikh Rahman al-Mansour was not accustomed to being surprised. At 43, he had built an empire spanning oil refineries, tech startups, and real estate across 3 continents. His net worth fluctuated somewhere north of $8 billion, though the exact figure changed so rapidly that even his accountants struggled to pin it down. He had negotiated with presidents, outmaneuvered corporate raiders, and crushed competitors who underestimated him. Very little in this world caught him off guard. Yet the waitress who had just demonstrated knowledge of contract law while delivering appetizers had done exactly that. Rahman sat at table 14 with the stillness of a desert hawk, his 6'2" frame impeccably dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. His angular features, sharp cheekbones, and intense dark eyes gave him an aura of dangerous intelligence. A neatly trimmed beard framed a mouth that rarely smiled without calculation behind it. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe watch gleamed discreetly, a $400,000 timepiece he wore with the casualness of someone for whom such numbers meant nothing. He had arrived in New York 3 days earlier for a series of high-stakes meetings, staying in the Grandview's penthouse suite while finalizing a $600 million investment deal. The contract in his briefcase, all 47 pages of it, represented months of negotiation with a consortium of American investors. His lawyers had crafted it with meticulous care, including several cleverly disguised clauses that would give Rahman leverage should any party attempt to renege on their commitments. Clause 7 in particular was his masterpiece, a section so densely written with legal terminology that it had confused 3 different law firms during preliminary reviews. The clause established arbitration procedures while simultaneously limiting the investors' rights in ways they wouldn't discover until it was too late. Rahman considered it a test of competence. His lawyers had assured him it was airtight, untouchable. His business associate and translator, Faisal al-Rashid, sat across from him, a slighter man in his 30s with nervous energy and a tendency to defer to Rahman on all matters. Faisal had been with Rahman for 5 years, serving as both interpreter and assistant, though his primary value lay in his absolute loyalty rather than his initiative. "Your usual, Sheikh Rahman," the maître d' had asked upon seating them, already knowing the answer. "Yes, and make sure the lamb is prepared exactly as I specified last time, not a degree over medium rare." Now, as Rahman watched the waitress who had spoken about contract law return to the kitchen, something predatory stirred in his mind. He prided himself on reading people, on identifying their weaknesses and leveraging them to his advantage. This young woman clearly had education beyond her station, which meant she had fallen from somewhere higher. That fall created desperation, and desperation made people malleable, useful. "Faisal," he said quietly, his English accented but flawless, "find out about that waitress, the one who just spoke to table 15. Faisal nodded, pulling out his phone to discreetly message the hotel's management. Within minutes, he had a response. "Her name is Maya Chen. 28 years old, single mother. She attended Columbia Law School for 3 semesters before dropping out. Been working here for 2 years. Excellent employee reviews, never late, never complains." Faisal paused, reading further. "Hospital records indicate she has a daughter with significant medical expenses." Rahman's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Medical debt. The American dream's dark underbelly, the weight that crushed ambition beneath the burden of survival. He knew this leverage well, had used variations of it countless times in business. Desperate people made poor negotiators. "Interesting," he murmured, his mind already formulating possibilities. Maya returned to his table then, her professional smile firmly in place, though Rahman noticed the slight tension in her shoulders. She had recognized her mistake in speaking out at table 15, was now doubly careful to maintain proper boundaries. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Grandview Hotel Restaurant. My name is Maya, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with our signature cocktails, or would you prefer to see the wine list?" Rahman studied her for a long moment, watching a faint flush creep up her neck under his scrutiny. She had delicate features, exhaustion shadowing eyes that were nevertheless sharp and observant. Her posture was perfect, her diction careful, everything about her suggesting someone determined to maintain dignity despite circumstances that had clearly stripped away other choices. "Wine list," he said finally. "Something appropriate for lamb. And tell me, Maya, how does a law school dropout end up serving tables at the Grandview?" Maya's carefully constructed composure cracked for just a fraction of a second. The question hit her like a physical blow, not because it was rude, though it certainly crossed professional boundaries, but because it stripped away the protective anonymity she'd wrapped around herself like armor. In this restaurant, she was just Maya the waitress, efficient and invisible. This man had just forced her to be Maya Chen, the woman who'd failed. "I apologize if I've made you uncomfortable," Rahman continued, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly sorry. "I merely find it curious. Columbia law is not easy to gain admission to. Leaving suggests either catastrophic failure or catastrophic circumstances. Your comment at table 15 indicates the former is unlikely." Maya's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to deflect, to return to the safe script of wine recommendations and specials. But something in his gaze suggested he already knew the answer, was testing her honesty rather than seeking information. "My daughter needed me more than I needed a law degree," she said quietly, meeting his eyes with a dignity that surprised even herself. "Some choices aren't really choices at all." For a moment, something flickered across Rahman's face, too quick to identify before his expression returned to its neutral assessment. Faisal shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly unused to such direct exchanges with service staff. "A noble sacrifice," Rahman said, and Maya couldn't determine if he was being sincere or mocking. "Though I wonder if nobility pays medical bills. I assume that's why you made the sacrifice. Medical concerns?" Maya's hands tightened imperceptibly on her serving pad. This was veering into territory that felt dangerous, though she couldn't articulate why. Wealthy men didn't ask servers personal questions unless they wanted something, and Maya had learned through hard experience that what they wanted rarely benefited anyone but themselves. "If you'll excuse me, I'll fetch the wine list," she said, her voice professionally pleasant but firm. "I believe you'll find our sommelier's selection quite comprehensive." She turned to leave, but Rahman's voice stopped her. "Wait, I have a proposition for you." Maya froze. In her experience, propositions from wealthy men rarely involved anything she'd want to accept. She turned slowly, keeping her expression neutral. "I'm listening," she said carefully. Rahman leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him, in a gesture that suggested he was about to make a business deal rather than speak to his waitress. "I have a contract in my briefcase. 47 pages, standard investment agreement, reviewed by 3 separate law firms. I'm willing to bet that someone with your truncated legal education couldn't find a single issue with it." He paused, watching her reaction. "But if you could, I'd make it worth your while." Maya's heart began to pound. This was insane. This was a trap. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings, but that number, $180,000, the cost of Emma's surgery, flashed in her mind like a neon sign. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "Simple. I give you 1 hour to review my contract. If you find a legitimate issue, something my lawyers missed, I'll pay you $2 million, cash, transferred to your account immediately." The number hit Maya like a physical force. $2 million. Not just Emma's surgery, but every debt paid, every sleepless night ended, every desperate calculation about whether to buy groceries or insulin finally resolved. "And if I don't find anything?" she asked, though she already knew there had to be a catch. Rahman's smile was sharp as a knife's edge. "Then you owe me 1 year of service. Not as a waitress, but as my personal assistant, at minimum wage. Your time, your expertise, your complete availability, all mine for 12 months. Faisal's eyes widened, and he opened his mouth as if to protest, then thought better of it. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. A year of her life, away from Emma, bound to this man who looked at her like she was a particularly interesting chess piece. "Why would you make such an offer?" Maya asked. "What could you possibly gain?" "Entertainment," Rahman said simply, "and perhaps a lesson in humility for a waitress who thinks she knows more than 3 law firms. So, Maya Chen, do we have a deal?" Maya's world narrowed to a single point of decision. Around her, the restaurant continued its elegant ballet, waiters gliding between tables, the soft clink of crystal, murmured conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes. But all of it felt distant, muffled, as though she were underwater watching life happen to other people, while she stood at a crossroads that would define everything, $2 million or 1 year of servitude. Her daughter's face flashed in her mind. Emma with her gap-toothed smile and the small scar on her chest from the first surgery. Emma who drew pictures of hearts with crayons because she thought her own heart was special. Emma who asked why Mommy cried sometimes when she thought her daughter was asleep. Emma who deserved better than a mother trapped in an endless cycle of debt and desperation. "I need details," Maya heard herself say, her voice sounding strange and far away. "If I accept and lose, what exactly would this year of service entail?" Rahman's expression suggested he'd expected her to accept or refuse outright, not negotiate. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed his features. "You would work as my personal assistant, handling correspondence, managing schedules, occasionally attending business meetings. Nothing illegal, nothing that would compromise your dignity. You'd be compensated at federal minimum wage, $7.25 per hour, 40 hours per week, standard employment contract." "That's barely $15,000 for the entire year," Maya calculated quickly. "I have a daughter. I have rent. I have existing debts that won't pause for your entertainment." "Your existing living expenses would be covered," Rahman conceded. "Housing, healthcare for you and your daughter, basic necessities. Consider it part of the compensation package. But your time would be mine, Maya. When I need you in Dubai, you go to Dubai. When I need you in Singapore at 3 in the morning, you're there. No questions, no negotiations. And if I win, then you get $2 million and you never see me again." Maya looked at Faisal, who was studiously examining his water glass, clearly uncomfortable with this entire exchange. She looked at the other diners, oblivious to the life-altering gamble being discussed mere feet away. She looked at her own reflection in the polished silver of the dessert cart, seeing a woman who'd stopped recognizing herself years ago. "I want it in writing," she said finally. "The terms, the conditions, everything. And I want witnesses." Rahman's eyebrows rose. "You don't trust me?" "I don't trust anyone offering something that sounds too good to be true. If you're serious about this bet, prove it." For the first time that evening, Rahman's smile reached his eyes, transforming his calculating expression into something almost human. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew not only the 47-page contract he'd mentioned, but also a tablet computer. Faisal, draft a simple agreement, standard terms, clear conditions. Miss Chen reviews the investment contract for 1 hour. She finds a legitimate legal issue. She gets $2 million. She fails. She works for me for 1 year at the terms I specified. He turned back to Maya. As for witnesses, I suggest we ask your manager to observe. Give this transaction a veneer of official oversight. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. This was actually happening. This wasn't some fantasy, some desperate daydream during a double shift. This man was seriously offering her a chance to change her life completely, and all she had to do was be as smart as she'd once believed herself to be. "Before I agree," she said, "I need to make a phone call." 5 minutes. Rahman checked his expensive watch. "You have 3. Maya walked quickly to the staff area, her hands shaking as she pulled out her battered iPhone. She dialed her sister Christina, the only family she had left in New York. "Chris, I need you to listen carefully. If something happens tonight, if I don't come home, Emma is with Mrs. Rodriguez in 4B. There's $200 in the cookie jar. Tell Emma I love her. Tell her Mommy is trying to make everything better." "Maya, what the hell is going on?" "I'm about to make either the best or worst decision of my life. I'll know which in about an hour." When Maya returned to table 14, she found the manager, Thomas Bradley, standing beside Rahman with an expression that mixed confusion and concern. Thomas had been good to her during her 2 years at the Grandview, always fair, never condescending. Now he looked at her as though seeing a stranger. "Maya, Sheikh Al-Mansour has explained the situation," Thomas said carefully. "I have to say, this is highly irregular. I'm not sure the restaurant should be involved in personal wages between guests and staff." "It's not personal," Maya said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "It's a business transaction. Sheikh Al-Mansour is offering me compensation for consulting work, the review of a legal document. I'm simply requesting a witness to ensure both parties honor the agreement." Thomas's eyebrows rose at her phrasing. She was reframing the bet as something legitimate, professional, smart. "The young lady is correct," Rahman interjected smoothly. "This is merely an unusual employment opportunity. I require her legal expertise for 1 hour. The compensation structure is unconventional, but entirely legal. Your presence as witness would be appreciated, but is not strictly necessary." The implied dismissal in Rahman's tone had the opposite effect. Thomas straightened his spine, his manager's instinct to protect his employee overriding his deference to a wealthy guest. "If Maya agrees to this, I'll stay," Thomas said firmly, "just to ensure everything is above board." Faisal looked up from the tablet. "The agreement is ready, Sheikh Rahman." Rahman gestured for Maya to sit. She slid into the chair beside him, acutely aware of the expensive cologne he wore, the casual power in his posture. Faisal turned the tablet toward her, displaying a document that was remarkably straightforward, considering what it represented. Consulting agreement. This agreement, entered on October 31st, 2025, between Rahman Al-Mansour, client, and Maya Chen, consultant, establishes the following terms. Consultant will review a 47-page investment contract for legal issues, errors, or problematic language within a 60-minute period. If consultant identifies any legitimate legal issue confirmed by client's legal counsel, client will pay consultant $2 million within 48 hours via wire transfer. If consultant fails to identify any legitimate legal issue within 60 minutes, consultant agrees to 1 year of employment as client's personal assistant at $7.25 per hour, 40 hours weekly, with housing and health care provided for consultant and dependent child. This agreement is binding and enforceable under New York law. Maya read it 3 times, her law school training kicking in despite her racing heart. The language was clean, the terms clear, no hidden clauses, no ambiguous phrasing. Either Rahman was genuinely playing fair, or he was so confident she'd lose that he didn't bother rigging the game. "I need one addition," Maya said. "Define legitimate legal issue." Rahman's lips twitched. "Clever." "Hazel, add clause 5. A legitimate legal issue is defined as any ambiguity, contradiction or error in the contract that could reasonably be challenged in court or that contradicts established contract law principles." Faisal typed quickly, then turned the screen back to Maya. She read the addition, nodded slowly. "And I want it stated that I can make notes, that I'm allowed to read the contract in its entirety without interference." "Agreed." "Faisal." Another quick addition appeared on the screen. Maya looked at Thomas, who was reading over her shoulder, his frown deepening with each clause. "Maya, you don't have to do this," he said quietly. "This man is basically betting you'll fail. A year of your life is worth it," Maya interrupted. "Emma's surgery costs $180,000, Thomas. I'm $340,000 in debt. This is my only chance." Thomas fell silent, the weight of her desperation settling over the table like a heavy blanket. Rahman watched the exchange with unreadable eyes, then gestured to the tablet. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Chen?" Maya picked up the stylus, her hand hovering over the signature line. This was it, the point of no return. She thought of Emma's drawing on their refrigerator, a stick figure mommy and daughter holding hands under a rainbow. She thought of the hospital bills stacked on her kitchen counter. She thought of every humiliation, every sacrifice, every moment of wondering if she'd made the wrong choice, dropping out of law school. Then she signed. Rahman signed immediately after, followed by Faisal's witness signature. Thomas added his name with visible reluctance. "Excellent," Rahman said, checking his watch. "It's now 8:17 p.m. You have until 9:17 p.m. Shall we begin?" Rahman pulled the 47-page contract from his briefcase with the flourish of a magician producing a rabbit. The document was pristine, professionally bound, each page crisp and intimidating. He set it before Maya with a confidence that bordered on cruelty, then leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, watching her with the patient intensity of a cat watching a mouse. "Your hour begins now," he said. Maya picked up the contract with hands that trembled slightly, though whether from fear or adrenaline, even she couldn't say. The title page announced it as an investment partnership agreement between Al Mansour Holdings LLC and a consortium of American venture capital firms. The date was recent, October 15, 2025. The amount involved made her breath catch. $600 million. She flipped past the title page, past the table of contents, and dove into Article 1, Definitions and Interpretations. This was where most contracts laid their foundation, establishing what terms meant, how language would be construed. Maya's eyes scanned rapidly, her law school training rushing back like muscle memory. The definition section appeared standard. Party meant the signatories. Business day meant weekdays excluding federal holidays. Material adverse effect had the typical carve-outs. Nothing suspicious jumped out, but Maya knew better than to skim. Devils lived in details. She grabbed a pen from her apron pocket and began making notes on the napkin Thomas had discreetly slid toward her. Her handwriting, cramped and rapid, tracked key terms and cross-references. Article 2 covered the investment structure. Rahman's company would receive $600 million in exchange for a 30% equity stake in a new tech venture focused on AI predictive modeling. The investors would have certain protective provisions, board seats, information rights, standard venture capital fare, though the numbers were astronomical, 8:27 p.m., 10 minutes gone, 37 pages remaining. Maya forced herself to speed up without sacrificing comprehension. Article 3, Detailed Representations and Warranties. The section where both parties made promises about their legal status, authority, and the accuracy of provided information. She checked for asymmetry, for places where one side bore disproportionate risk. The language seemed balanced, almost suspiciously so. Rahman had ordered his lamb and was now cutting into it with surgical precision, each movement deliberate and unhurried. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, occasionally glancing at Maya with amusement dancing in his dark eyes. Faisal sat rigidly, barely touching his own meal, clearly uncomfortable with the entire situation. "Finding anything interesting?" Rahman asked casually, as though inquiring about the weather. "Don't distract her," Thomas snapped, surprising everyone, including himself. Rahman's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing, returning his attention to his meal. Article 4. Covenants. This section imposed obligations on both parties during the partnership. Rahman's company had to maintain certain financial metrics, provide quarterly reports, refrain from competing ventures. The investors had similar restrictions. Maya checked for vague language, for obligations that might be impossible to fulfill, for covenant traps that could trigger defaults. Nothing obvious emerged. 8:42 p.m., 25 minutes elapsed, 23 pages remaining. Her eyes were starting to burn, the dense legal text blurring slightly. She blinked hard, forced herself to focus. Article 5 covered governance and management, board composition, voting rights, major decision approval thresholds. She mapped out the power structure, looking for places where control could shift unexpectedly. The provisions seemed equitable, though weighted slightly in Rahman's favor, as one would expect from someone contributing existing assets. Article 6. Financial provisions. Capital calls, distributions, tax allocations. Maya's head swam with numbers and percentages. Her contract law professor's voice echoed in her memory. Follow the money. If there's a trap, it's usually where money changes hands. She double-checked the calculation methods, the priority waterfalls, the distribution triggers. Everything appeared mathematically sound and clearly articulated. 8:57 p.m., 40 minutes gone, 17 pages remaining. Panic began creeping in at the edges of her consciousness. She was moving too slowly. 47 pages in 60 minutes meant less than 90 seconds per page, and she'd already blown past that pace. Maybe Rahman was right. Maybe 3 semesters of law school weren't enough. Maybe she was about to condemn herself to a year of servitude for nothing. Then she reached Article 7, Dispute Resolution and Arbitration, Clause 7. Her eyes caught on something, a linguistic irregularity that made her pause. Clause 7 was dense, almost deliberately so. The text sprawled across 2 pages in a single unbroken paragraph that read like it had been written by a committee of lawyers, all trying to protect different interests simultaneously. Maya's eyes tracked across the sentences, her brain automatically parsing the complex subordinate clauses and cross-references. 7. On arbitration procedures, any dispute arising under or relating to this agreement shall be resolved through binding arbitration in accordance with the commercial arbitration rules of the American Arbitration Association, provided that such arbitration shall be conducted in New York, unless the parties mutually agree otherwise, and further provided that the arbitrator shall have the authority to award any remedy or relief that a court of this jurisdiction could order or grant. Provided, however, that in the event of any dispute relating to the interpretation of terms originally drafted in Arabic, or involving parties domiciled in jurisdictions where Arabic is an official language, such disputes shall be resolved in accordance with the principles of Sharia-compliant arbitration under the Dubai International Arbitration Center rules, which supersede the provisions of this clause in such circumstances. Maya read it once, twice, 3 times. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Layla Chen had emigrated from Lebanon in the 1960s, marrying Maya's Chinese-American grandfather, but never abandoning her native tongue. She'd taught Maya Arabic from childhood, insisting that languages were treasures, that bilingualism opened doors monolinguals never knew existed. Words mean different things in different tongues, her grandmother had said. Sometimes, what sounds strong in English reveals weakness in Arabic. Maya's eyes focused on the phrase, principles of Sharia-compliant arbitration. Something about it nagged at her, a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious symphony. She read it again, this time sounding out the English words, while her brain automatically translated them into Arabic. Then she saw it. The clause established that disputes would be resolved through American arbitration in New York, unless they involved Arabic language interpretations or parties from Arabic-speaking jurisdictions, in which case Dubai's Islamic arbitration rules would apply. That seemed straightforward enough, even clever, a nod to Rahman's cultural background while maintaining American legal standards for most issues. But there was a problem, a massive, glaring problem that 3 law firms had somehow missed. In Section 2.3 of the contract, buried in the investment structure article, the agreement explicitly stated that all terms, provisions, and interpretations shall be construed under New York law, and the English language version shall prevail in any dispute regarding meaning or intent. Clause 7, however, created a carve-out that directly contradicted this. If any dispute involved Arabic interpretations, it deferred to Dubai's arbitration system, which operated under entirely different legal principles. But Section 4.7 of the Covenant's article stated that Al-Mansour Holdings LLC shall maintain all corporate records in both English and Arabic, with both versions considered equally authoritative. Maya's heart began to race. She grabbed her napkin and began sketching a diagram connecting the contradictory provisions. Section 2.3, English version prevails, New York law governs. Section 4.7, English and Arabic versions equally authoritative. Clause 7.1, Arabic-related disputes defer to Dubai arbitration, Sharia principles. But here was the devastating part. The phrase, principles of Sharia-compliant arbitration, translated into Arabic as Mabadi' al-Tahkim al-Mutawafiq ma'a Sharia. Mabadi' al-Tahkim al-Mutawafiq ma'a Sharia. In Islamic legal tradition, this phrase carried a specific meaning. Disputes must be resolved in a manner that prioritizes equitable resolution over strict contractual enforcement. The principle of insaf, equity, superseded rigid contract terms. This meant that any dispute involving the Arabic versions of corporate records, which Section 4.7 made equally authoritative, would theoretically be resolved under principles that could override the contract's specific provisions. Investors thinking they had ironclad protections under New York law would suddenly find themselves in Dubai arbitration, where the entire contract could be reinterpreted through an equity lens. 9:07 p.m. 50 minutes elapsed, 10 pages unread. Maya looked up at Rahman, whose confident expression had barely wavered. But Faisal had gone pale, his eyes fixed on her napkin where she'd been writing notes, some in English, some in Arabic script. "You read Arabic," Faisal whispered, more statement than question. Rahman's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "My grandmother was Lebanese," Maya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "She taught me Arabic before I could properly speak English. I'm not fluent in legal terminology, but I know enough to recognize when a phrase carries different weight in translation." Rahman set down his fork with careful precision, his expression shifting from amused confidence to something harder to read. "You're suggesting there's an issue with Clause 7? Not suggesting, stating." Maya flipped back through the contract, her fingers marking 3 separate pages. Section 2.3 declares English as the controlling language and New York law as governing. But Section 4.7 requires you to maintain corporate records in both English and Arabic, designating both as equally authoritative. Then Clause 7.1 creates an exception for disputes involving Arabic interpretations, deferring to Dubai arbitration under Sharia-compliant principles. She looked directly at Rahman, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. These three provisions are fundamentally incompatible. If both language versions are equally authoritative, but English supposedly prevails in disputes, which actually controls, and if any dispute touches on the Arabic records, which Section 4.7 makes mandatory, does that automatically trigger the Dubai arbitration carve-out? Thomas leaned forward, suddenly interested. That sounds like a contradiction. It's more than a contradiction, Maya continued, warming to her analysis. It's a trap. Under Sharia-compliant arbitration principles, specifically the concept of insaf, or equity, an arbitrator has broad discretion to override strict contractual terms in favor of fairness. Your American investors think they're protected by New York law and their carefully negotiated provisions. But in reality, any dispute that involves your corporate records, which must be kept in Arabic, could be reframed under an entirely different legal framework that potentially nullifies their protections. Faisal was staring at Rahman with an expression that mixed horror and accusation. Sheikh Rahman, she's right. The Dubai Center would apply INSAF principles, the investors' liquidation preferences, their board seats, their anti-dilution protection. All of it could be deemed inequitable and modified. Faisal, Rahman's voice was sharp, a warning, but Faisal continued, his loyalty apparently having limits. This is exactly what happened with the Abu Dhabi deal. The Australian investors thought they had ironclad protections, but when the dispute went to Dubai arbitration, the panel ruled that several provisions were unfairly weighted and restructured the entire agreement. They lost $40 million. Maya felt her pulse quicken. She was right. She'd found it. The carefully constructed trap that three law firms had missed because none of them had lawyers who could read Arabic legal terms with cultural understanding, who knew that certain phrases carried implications that didn't translate cleanly into English legal frameworks. More than that, Maya added, her confidence growing, Clause 7.1 uses the phrase supersede the provisions of this clause in such circumstances. That's ambiguous. Does this clause refer only to Clause 7.1 or to broader provisions in the contract? A good lawyer could argue it supersedes any conflicting provisions, which would include your investors' protective rights throughout the entire agreement. Rahman sat back in his chair, his jaw tight. For the first time that evening, he looked like a man whose plan had just exploded in his face. He checked his watch, a gesture that seemed more like buying time than genuine interest in the hour. 9:12 p.m., 5 minutes remaining. Your analysis is creative, he said finally, his tone carefully neutral. My analysis is correct, Maya countered, and you know it. This contract would never survive a challenge in court. Any competent judge would see the contradictions and potentially void the entire agreement for lack of mutual assent. Section 2.3 and Clause 7.1 can't both be true. They establish incompatible legal frameworks. Thomas was grinning now, a broad smile that suggested he understood enough to realize Maya had just won. I believe that constitutes a legitimate legal issue, Sheikh Al-Mansour, a significant one, at that. Rahman's dark eyes fixed on Maya with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she held his gaze. She'd found his trap. She'd beaten him at his own game. And now he owed her $2 million. You should be proud of your grandmother, Rahman said quietly. Her gift just saved you from a very unpleasant year. The silence that followed Rahman's concession stretched out like taffy, thick and uncomfortable. Maya's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was beginning to ebb, replaced by the dawning realization of what she'd just accomplished. $2 million. Emma's surgery, every debt erased. A future that had seemed impossible 10 minutes ago was now tangible, real. Rahman pulled out his phone, his movements deliberate and controlled, despite what must have been considerable frustration. He typed something, then looked at Faisal. "Contact Marcus at Sullivan and Cromwell. Tell him we need the investment contract completely restructured. Clause 7 needs to be rewritten from scratch, and we need someone who understands both Arabic and American contract law to review every section. This could have cost me..." He paused, calculating, potentially hundreds of millions if the investors had discovered it during a dispute. Faisal nodded, already pulling out his own phone. But his eyes kept darting to Maya with something that looked like newfound respect. Rahman turned back to Maya, his expression unreadable. "I underestimated you. That was arrogant and foolish. 3 law firms reviewed that contract. Expensive firms with attorneys who bill $1,500 an hour. None of them caught what you found in 50 minutes. 55 minutes, Maya corrected, glancing at her watch. 9:14 p.m. I still had time. A ghost of a smile crossed Rahman's face. Indeed. He tapped his phone screen several times, then turned it toward her. Your banking information? Maya's breath caught. This was it. The moment that would change everything. She recited her account number, the one attached to her checking account that rarely held more than $300 at a time. Rahman entered the information with the casual efficiency of someone who moved millions regularly. The transfer will complete within 48 hours, as specified in our agreement. $2 million. He set down his phone. But I'd like to make an additional offer. Maya's stomach clenched. There was always a catch. Always. I don't owe you anything else, she said carefully. Our agreement was clear. I'm aware this is separate, independent. Rahman leaned forward, his intensity returning but now focused differently, more calculated than cruel. You just saved me from a catastrophic legal vulnerability. More than that, you demonstrated analytical skills that my very expensive legal team lacks. I'm prepared to offer you a position as a legal consultant for Al Mansour Holdings. Maya blinked, certain she'd misheard. A consultant? $250,000 annually to start, with performance bonuses. You would review contracts, particularly those involving international parties or Arabic language provisions. Flexible hours, mostly remote work. Full benefits, including healthcare, that would cover your daughter's medical needs. He paused. You'd be an independent contractor, not an employee. You could continue working here if you wished, or pursue other opportunities. I'm not interested in owning your time, Miss Chen. I'm interested in accessing your particular expertise. Thomas made a small sound, something between a laugh and a gasp. Maya, that's generous, Rahman interrupted, but also pragmatic. Finding someone with your skill set, someone who understands both American contract law and Arabic legal principles, is extremely difficult. You're valuable. I'm simply acknowledging that value. Maya's mind reeled. $2 million plus a $250,000 a year consulting position. It was too much, too perfect. Life didn't work this way, not for single mothers working double shifts and drowning in debt. Why? She asked, voicing the suspicion that gnawed at her. You could find experienced lawyers who specialize in international contracts. Why me? Because experienced lawyers think like lawyers. They see what they expect to see. You saw what was actually there because you approached the contract without assumptions, without the blindness that comes from too much confidence. Rahman's expression softened slightly. And because you remind me of someone. My sister, actually. She was brilliant, spoke 5 languages, had a mind like a steel trap. She died young, childbirth complications. I've spent 20 years wishing I'd valued her mind more when I had the chance." The unexpected vulnerability in his voice made Maya's defenses waver. This wasn't the calculating billionaire who'd made a cruel bet. This was someone who'd just been humbled and was trying, in his own way, to make amends. "I need time to think," Maya said finally. "Of course. The offer stands regardless of your decision." Rahman stood, pulling out his wallet and extracting several bills. "For dinner. And Thomas," he looked at the manager, "give Maya the rest of the night off. She's earned it." Maya stood outside the Grandview Hotel at 9:47 p.m., her server's uniform still on, her mind spinning with the impossible reality of what had just happened. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of roasting chestnuts from a nearby vendor, and the perpetual smell of exhaust that defined Manhattan. Around her, the city pulsed with its usual frenetic energy. Taxis honking, tourists photographing themselves against the glittering skyline, professionals rushing home from late meetings. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and called her sister. "Christina, it happened. I won." The scream that erupted from the phone was so loud Maya had to hold it away from her ear. People passing by glanced at her curiously, but she didn't care. For the first time in years, she let herself smile without restraint, without the weight of worry crushing it into something smaller and sadder. $2 million, Chris. Emma's surgery is covered. Everything is covered. We're going to be okay. As she could hear her sister crying, laughing, asking 100 questions that Maya would answer later. For now, she just needed to hear the joy, to let it wash over her, and confirm that this was real, that the nightmare of debt and desperation had finally ended. "I need to see Emma," Maya said. "Can you bring her to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment? I'm coming home now." 20 minutes later, Maya burst through the door of her tiny Queen's apartment to find Emma sitting on the worn couch in her princess pajamas, looking sleepy but alert. Christina stood behind her, tears streaming down her face, while Mrs. Rodriguez from 4B watched from the doorway with a knowing smile. "Mommy!" Emma launched herself at Maya, who caught her and spun her around, something she hadn't had the energy to do in months. "Baby girl, we're going to get you all better," Maya whispered into her daughter's hair. "The doctors are going to fix your heart completely, and you'll be able to run and dance and do everything you've ever wanted to do." "Really?" Emma pulled back, her 6-year-old eyes wide with hope that broke Maya's heart even as it filled it. "Really, I promise." Later, after Emma had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, after Christina had finally gone home, after Mrs. Rodriguez had extracted the full story with gasps and exclamations, Maya sat alone in her cramped living room. She looked at Emma's crayon drawings covering the walls, at the stack of medical bills she'd soon pay off completely, at the small apartment that had felt like a prison but now felt like a launching pad. Her phone buzzed. An email from Rahman's legal team outlining the consulting position in formal detail. Real, legitimate, life-changing. She thought about her grandmother Layla, who died 3 years earlier, never knowing how profoundly her gift of language would matter. She thought about the path that had led her here, dropping out of law school, working double shifts, sacrificing everything for Emma. She'd thought those choices had been failures, endings to dreams. But maybe they'd been preparations. Maybe every hardship had been sharpening her into exactly the person who could seize this impossible opportunity when it appeared. Maya opened her laptop and began drafting an email, accepting Rahman's consulting offer. As she typed, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of survival, but the expansive hope of possibility, of futures beyond mere survival. She thought about Clause 7, about how a single overlooked detail had nearly cost Rahman hundreds of millions. She thought about how her grandmother's language lessons, Her truncated law school education and her desperate circumstances had converged into this single moment of opportunity. Sometimes life changed with grand gestures and dramatic announcements, but sometimes it changed in the space of an hour in a restaurant over a 47-page contract that nobody expected a waitress to understand. Maya saved her email draft and walked to Emma's makeshift bedroom. She kissed her daughter's forehead, feeling the steady, imperfect heartbeat that would soon be fixed, healed, made whole. "Thank you, Grandma Layla," she whispered into the darkness. "Your gift saved us both." And so ends the story of how a single mother, a cruel billionaire's bet, and a grandmother's legacy converged into a moment that changed everything. Maya's knowledge of Arabic, her legal training, and her desperate courage combined to reveal a trap that had fooled 3 law firms. From waitress to consultant, from drowning in debt to financial security, her journey reminds us that our unique combination of skills and experiences makes us valuable in ways we might never predict. Thank you for reading. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more dramatic, inspiring tales. Let us know in the comments what unique skill or knowledge has unexpectedly helped you. And remember, the abilities you think make you ordinary might be exactly what makes you extraordinary.